Digital human chatbot company Ambit is attracting a lot of attention from tech-savvy investors after its recent capital raise was oversubscribed. Chief Executive Josh Comrie says the funds will be instrumental in the company's next step onto the globe to tackle the potentially enormous artificial intelligence service sector market. He joins me now. So where did the idea for Ambit come from?
So through a pretty structured process, actually, Grant. So about 2.5 years ago, I brought together a group of what I believe were thought leaders, and with the intent of looking at some ideas that we could potentially build into a business at some stage. We business model canvassed some ideas, and a thing that kept on bubbling to the surface was artificial intelligence. And so we focused on that and realised there was a great business model in it. So we built that business.
So you didn't even know what the business was going to be. You just wanted a business and you wanted to surround yourself with certain people.
That's right. So based on the theory that get some good people into the room with some bright ideas and put some structure around that thinking, and then from that would come some innovation. And we had some tenets or some premises on what we wanted the business to be. Business-to-business software company based out of New Zealand, as B2C has not successfully yet been built out of this country. Something that was at the start of the hype cycle, and something that we thought would have a meaningful impact upon the world, so that would offer the opportunity for scale. And those three things were represented in the artificial intelligence space.
Chatbots is not the easiest thing in the world, so why would you probably pick one of the hardest?
Yeah, so good question. We tend to avoid the nomenclature chatbots, by the way, Grant. So a lot of people's experience, if they have had them, are that it is a pretty numb and unhuman experience. So we refer to ourselves as a conversation platform company. And so you're right, there's a lot of nuances around being able to replicate human conversation through a machine. And so why did we pick that? Because we're able to build a moat around the technology and also get ourselves into a position where we're sticky with inside an organisation. So as a SaaS company, it's very important to make sure that what you have and offer to an organisation is something that an organisation derives real value from, but also continues to need to implement further across their business.
I'm guessing that the hardest challenge is for the public to accept that they're not talking to a real person. How do you overcome that?
We're very honest and upfront with the fact that this is a bot from the outset, and so we've had some dialogue internally, and some of our customers had the idea that perhaps they should look to be a little oblique about the fact that this was a bot that people are talking to. But research shows that once people know that they are talking to a bot, then they have a greater propensity for some empathy towards the fact that it's a bot, and it may not know the answer to every single question. So a good kind of stance to take when talking to a bot is that you're not in dialogue with a fully grown adult, but rather you're talking to a 5-year-old or perhaps an 8-year-old. And over time, that entity becomes smarter and becomes better over time. But we're very frank and open at the outset that this is a bot that people are talking to.
But it's interesting you say you're talking to a 5 or 8-year-old, but if I'm talking to someone about business, I don't want to talk to a 5 or 8-year-old, do I?
So I'll perhaps qualify that statement by saying that a 5 or 8-year-old who knows something very deep on one specific subject matter. So if we continue with that analogy, then it's a 5-year-old who knows a lot about Tonka cars, for example. Imagine if you're a Tonka bot, but then not a lot about many other things around the place. So our method of going to market with our customers on their behalf is to focus on a use case or resolving a specific problem at the outset, and then build out more capability over time. So I guess what I'm referring to is that we've not built and we've not come across an organisation that has a bot that can do everything, but rather does a couple of things very, very well, and then identify the opportunities to build out more capability over time.
So that's your niche?
Well, our niche is actually anyone that engages with customers en masse. So if we look at organisations that have more than around about 10,000 customers or more than 1,000 staff, they tend to have a need for repetitive processes that are built in to support those. And they often have the same questions being asked of the organisation just by different people. And so that presents a real opportunity to have a bot kind of step in and take away a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the repetitive kind of mundane aspect of work.
So as members of the public, we're becoming more accepted. We're okay with it now, as opposed to I don't want to talk to a bot, if you like. Are we accepting it more?
Yeah, I believe so. And our customers that have implemented the technology have found that, yes, customers are very accepting of it. And so I think if you refer to some of the alternatives that exist, you remember there was a period when a lot of the large organisations in New Zealand outsourced their contact centres to different parts of the world, and those that often had English as a second, perhaps as a third language. And the experience in a number of instances wasn't great. immediately spring to mind the Telecom when they outsourced the 018 phone number. And it was a bit of a terrible experience for Telecom because at that time the internet was coming into its own and they outsourced it to, I believe it was the Philippines. And so the experience left customers quite numb. They often got the wrong phone number. And so by the time they flipped it back to New Zealand, people had gotten out of the habit of calling 018 and had started to go to the internet instead. So it effectively killed that business. So if we move on to today, I think that people with that as being one alternative, but also web forms and the very two-dimensional nature of web forms, people are starting to expect to have a better dialogue 24/7, 365 in whatever medium they would like to be able to with an organisation.
It's interesting though, because when you ring someone and they speak, there's 6 seconds that they have to impress you that they're going to deliver. How do you get around that?
Yeah, so what we've found with people when they first engage with a bot is that they tend to like to be a little irreverent at the outset, and so they like to kind of either try and cheat the bot or be a little cheeky with it. So things like, how are you, who are you, is there a God, what is the meaning of life, and so, and can I have a date is a frequently asked question as well. You'd be surprised. And so what we do is we've built in, hardwired into all of our bots, a module that we call Small Talk, and that enables the bot to be able to have a meaningful and kind of human-like conversation with the customer or the chatter at the other end. And so that kind of lightens the mood or the tone of that experience, and also kind of builds people in, once they know that it's a bot, that I can do these kind of 2 or 3 things on your behalf, not everything. And then we can also kind of direct you towards other resources if we're unable to help you through the bot channel.
Is there an issue with the New Zealand accent? I mean, for example, if you tell Siri, sometimes it doesn't understand, you give it a street number, it doesn't understand your Kiwi accent, for example. Do you have those issues?
Yeah, so if we separate between the different channels to customer, between text, so that's what people tend to refer to as chatbot, and text could be deployed across web, so either mobile or desktop, or it could be deployed across any of the messaging platforms that are available. So think Facebook Messenger or Microsoft Teams or Slack or Skype, any of those messaging channels. So those are text-based, so it removes the prospect for an accent becoming an issue. Then if we look at the human spoken accent, we use a pretty sophisticated speech-to-text generator, and so it's actually pretty accurate. It's more along the lines of Google's generator than it is along the lines of, say, Apple's Siri, which is not that great. I note that last week Apple made an acquisition of a speech-to-text company because I think they've realised they've kind of been left behind a little bit of recent times. Then the last is the digital avatar, which is the talking digital face, such as the likes of FaceMe and Soul Machines have created out of New Zealand. And so they all represent different channels out to market, and they all have different nuances around them in terms of how the communication is interpreted and how it's delivered and what becomes important in communicating with your customer.
All right, let's get down to the business side. The capital raise, 1.75 million, was oversubscribed. So why is everyone so excited about it?
Yeah, so I guess for us, so what may not be obvious is that I'm an experienced angel investor, more than 10 years in this space, and I've always sat on the other side of the table. And so, over 20 investments now over that time frame, some great New Zealand brands and a couple of successful exits. And so I was very accustomed to being the person evaluating the entrepreneurs and the founders of the company, but unaccustomed to doing the cap raise. My previous businesses I'd self-funded. And so for me, it was a real journey to go through, both from where we started, from what we anticipated the outcome to be, which was a successful raise, but where we thought the funds would come from and at what sort of cadence and delivery. So that was a bit of a surprise, but also very exciting. And then once we got there, it was a case of things cascading because we had a few individuals that took up the bulk of it. And once that had happened, then people kind of jumped on board. There's a bit of if that person knows what they're doing, and they seem to because they're high net worth, then surely we should get onto this opportunity as well. And so why are they excited about it? So out of New Zealand, there's been a small number of artificial intelligence startups. A good proportion of those, not all of them, because there are some great businesses out of this country, but a lot of them are still working on things out of the lab. And so actually having paying customers, of which we have over a dozen now, New Zealand household logo brands, ACC, Tower, Vector, KPMG, Vodafone, and so on, meant that we have validated that we have a product which is ready for the market and that customers would like to pay us some meaningful sums of money for it.
Well, if you're going to pick any companies to have on your starting list, they're good ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, very excited about the customers.
What are you going to use the money for?
So it's a combination of two things. So firstly, to take the product internationally. So the Australian market is the first port of call for us. And so personally, I'll be relocating to Australia.
Why Australia as opposed to America, for example?
Yeah, a number of different reasons. So Australia looks to be, based upon my experience thus far, having spent the last 6 months week on, week off, a larger version in terms of its market readiness and the sophistication of the market of New Zealand. So there is no incumbent supplier there. There's no major competitor that's in that market. So they're really at the same place of readiness that New Zealand is, but they're an economy of much greater scale, so 8 to 10 times the scale of New Zealand. The economic structure is quite similar. The brands are similar. The way that customers engage with those brands. The superannuation scheme is similar. We have a strength in financial services, but not focused just on financial services. So it looks like the opportunity is one that is a much greater scale of New Zealand, but also there's some comfort around doing business in Australia, which in the States we'll evaluate over the next kind of 6 to 12 months, and we'll establish our go-to-market plan in the States over that time frame. The States is the golden prize, it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it can be very expensive to go and establish a business in the States, and a lot of organisations have burnt more money before they've seen success in that market. So,
ASX or NZX?
Hard to say, and I probably won't comment on that at this stage, Grant.
Fair enough. In terms of data mining, if you like, what do you get out? What data do you get from engaging with me?
Yeah, that's the right question. So this is when things get really exciting. So once these entities, these instances of bots become embedded inside an organisation, and as I mentioned, we start delivering to 1 or 2 use cases and then expand those out over time, we have an incredible visibility on a real-time basis of the questions and the conversations and the requests that customers are having of an organisation. Where we're going as a business is to become the conversation hub inside an organisation. And so take away just the channels that I mentioned earlier of text, avatar and voice, and incorporate email and internal comms channels, and you have an incredible richness of dialogue, which gives the organisation the ability to have some insight into what people want of them, what products they might be able to create and build over time, any issues that might be happening, any sentiment that's out in the marketplace, and then act on those, so actionable insights on a real-time basis. So right now, the data comes in 2 forms. So there's anonymised data, which is just the things that people are saying to us, and then there's customer account-specific data. And so if the bot is integrated with a data source, then we know what customer A, what Grant is, what is he interested in, and the types of things that he buys. And then through some machine learning and some smart analysis in the background, we can do some predictive analysis and work out that you've bought some things like other people have bought, therefore you might be interested in a different product offering along the way as well. But also there's a part of a bigger group of customers and a trend that's going on in the market as well.
So great value add.
Great value add, and very, very sticky again.
What's your end game?
Yeah, so build a great business is the intent. So a great business is one that has an enduring legacy behind it, that has the ability to generate a strong kind of level of cash flow. And if that is a business that someone at some point in time may turn up and say, we really need that in our product set, and they make us a compelling offer, then we'd consider that. If it's a great business that we can build and continue to run, then we would also consider that.
I appreciate you talking to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grant.